Where things are right now, the film mentions that they're planning another mine. There's 15 more diamond deposits on the territory. But since the blockade happened, the community's been they're not willing to discuss the new mine until existing issues with the IBA are addressed. They're not feeling like they're properly benefiting, and there's a lot of concern about the environmental issues. And when De Beers did their environmental assessment, and my father and Wildlands League were raising a lot of concerns, it changed sort of things with the permitting process, and they have to reapply. And their permit to take water, there's some delays that are happening with another permit that's coming for the existing mine. So there's a lot happening, and then also the community is looking into how Treaty 9 was signed with their community and how that applies to them. So that's still kind of a live issue, and they're trying to figure out whether they have a court case with it. So there's definitely still ongoing, and then of course with the Ring of Fire is just upriver from them, and that's going to be a major mining development in the next few years. Because this is actually my MFA thesis film, I kind of had a good deal of equipment. They let me take it. My supervisor's here actually. He helped hook me up for taking it for about 80 days over 2 summers. So the first time I spent there was about 6 weeks by myself. I went up there and I spent the summer. And you know, I didn't want to just show up and get my camera out. I wanted to spend time there. It's very expensive to get up there. It's incredibly hard there's no roads, obviously you have to fly in. So yeah, in total I probably spent about 80 days in the community.
How did you build up the relationships?
Just spending time there, and I think also thinking about how you give back to the community, and a lot of those workshops, the video workshops that I did, and sharing skills, and just spending time talking to people and participating in community life and listening. And I did a lot of just community events that didn't make it into the film. It was quite an interesting like spiritual journey for me, which isn't in the film. I participated in a lot of ceremonies, which was really eye-opening for me. So yeah, I kind of literally just was hanging out. People were like, "What are you doing here?" Because I wasn't always filming. I was just sort of hanging out, teaching youth, hanging out with kids. So yeah, it was just time.
And that's been, De Beers been in contact with you since the film, so.
Well, yeah, actually they showed up to my thesis defense, which was nerve-wracking. Of course, at film school, no one shows up on time. So I'm setting up the projector at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, and in walks Tom Ormsby from De Beers. And I was like, "Hi, what are you doing here?" So that was interesting.
What was he doing there?
A good question. It was a move that was I can't really.
Intimidation?
I don't want to. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it was. I was definitely intimidated. I was terrified. I was like, "How did you find out? This isn't posted on the internet." So it was. They're very. You know, Attawapiskat has been in the news quite a lot over the years with Adam Lamore and the housing crisis. And when I talk about the community, many people still don't know that there was a De Beers mine. You know, they're very good at managing their image. Diamonds are a product of incredible marketing. You know, there's a whole other film on just how effective De Beers is in their marketing campaigns over the last decade. So.
I heard that the first edition of the movie carried the name and the shadow of the mainframe, as I recall, which was head frame, which was a quote that we heard from that De Beers representative. And then the current name, I had no idea what it might mean until I saw that placard. But the placard was in and out of the movie so quickly that I think, to me, I was almost lost as to what it might mean. So what do you think is the meaning of the name?
There was a previous title that was in the shadow of the head frame. People didn't know what a head frame was, so that title was working as well. And so that placard that the girl is holding up during the protest is a saying. It's an anonymous saying. It's been attributed to a Cree, a Native American Cree saying after the last river has been poisoned, after the last tree has been cut down, after the last fish has been poisoned, only then will you realize that money can't be eaten. And I just thought it was, so Attawapiskat is one of the last, so Wildlands League describes it as one of the last great rivers in North America because it hasn't been dammed and it hasn't had much development other than the De Beers mine. So it's a very important last frontier. So I was thinking a lot about that when I had the title, and also the saying is kind of about a dialogue and a response, and when people realize, the balance of resource extraction and how much is too much, and it's a conversation between cultures. So I kind of like that, and also I think Attawapiskat really prompted a larger conversation in Canada about remote communities. So it's kind of like what happens after. We all know about Attawapiskat. When I started the film, people were like, well, people in the community just said to me, if only Canadians knew. If only Canadians knew what was happening here, things would be different. And then Canadians found out and things are not different. So it's kind of more of a question, like what happens after, the Attawapiskat River has been developed, what happens after the Ring of Fire. So it's more rhetorical. Yeah.
So how can this be heard in the sense of with the election or how the government's going to change its position and actually do something for what's going on?
Recently a lot of the discussion around Bill C-51 and what that means for protesters and Indigenous rights activists and just speaking and voicing their concern. It sort of not only has a lot of rights and environmental protections been taken away, but now that ability to be active, that is also at risk. So I think there's how do you get that? How do you get this back into the conversation? We're trying to start a website and a Twitter. You can follow us, but we're engaging with other NGOs and other groups, and we're hoping that the film is used to start a conversation. I think it's amazing what was different about Attawapiskat, and when the community hit the spotlight. CBC was like, we kind of did this story like last year, and they didn't actually decide to send someone up until they were seeing all the commenting that was happening, and so that was really the difference for Attawapiskat, and was the ability to have social media and have a conversation around it, even though some of the conversation was like horrible, like I did not expect to be hearing some of that. It was eye-opening for me, but certainly with Idle No More and the activism that's happening online, there's hope there for a conversation, but it's not easy. It's especially not easy here in Canada when a lot of voices are being silenced, so that's part of the issue.
That I think this film is extraordinarily brave, incredibly courageous, and I think from my own perspective, I will never be shopping at Berg's ever again. I personally believe, although this is probably fairly fused, that you actually filmed the end of democracy in this country.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a message that is so powerful that if it's ignored, that Canadians are going to pay a very big price going forward. And I think you were an incredibly amazing woman.
Yeah. There was a TV series a couple of years ago called Diamond Road that sort of followed the diamond industry globally. So I saw that, and then there's another film that I've heard about, and I haven't had a chance to track it down. But if you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear them. The second question was about Charlie Angus, and maybe Jill Bisson too, the provincial member. Charlie Angus is a great guy. He actually just finished a book about sort of the treaty and problems with Treaty 9 and the children and what that's meant for him. So he's doing a book. And I don't know what his political plans are. I think I don't see why he would not. He's been incredibly active in the community, and you can just see how hard it is to get that message heard about what's happening. So I hope he'll run again, but I can't say for sure.
The spin that Harper was doing about how much money had gone into the community, and with Charlie Angus's support, doing those numbers was very helpful. But I also really appreciate the fact that you included John Duncan's his role in this whole thing as well. He happens to currently be my member of parliament, and we're hoping very much to get rid of him. So I appreciate having that little clip in there yet again.
You started making this film a while ago, and did you have an idea? It seemed like it started from, it seemed to start with your father and what you knew, and you seemed to sort of follow that through, and it seemed to have taken you on this journey. So, did you have an idea of what? Did you have any idea of what kind of filmmaking and you were getting into? If you were going to be making a feature film, and what what did you think you were getting into? And looking back, and also. To see Teresa Spence, who we all know, or at least for me, like I know her from that mainstream media coverage, and it seems like this is someone you had a relationship with for years, and wondering what it was like to see, someone you had a relationship with, a subject of your film, suddenly become, for lack of a better word, a celebrity. Like, and suddenly it's not just you with your camera on her, but like every hundreds of other cameras. It suddenly must have felt like suddenly everyone was making your film with you, and just that must have been a unique experience as a filmmaker. And I'm wondering what that was like.
Yeah, I think I heard my supervisor laugh actually while he asked that question, because it was incredibly hard. When I first got to Attawapiskat, and I mentioned this in a voiceover, I'm asking about De Beers and the river and the traditional importance of the river, and then Teresa's like, let's go inside for a second, and I was just totally blown away. Like, I didn't realize, like, even people that have been up there, like, not everyone's living like that in the community, but it was like really shocking and eye-opening. And also my first week in the community, I was house sitting for someone, and my neighbors, they were Shannon's parents, and Shannon died that week. So she was the fifth young person so that took on a whole new thing, and I was spending a lot of time with young people. I hired a local production assistant, so seeing the community through their eyes, I was very kind of open to a process, and another way of saying that might be that I wasn't going in with a specific vision, and and how much of the environmental story I included, and how much of the story with my dad was something that, I didn't want it to be my story. I didn't want to involve it too much about me, but at the same time, it was important to contextualize how I came to Attawapiskat. So it's taken many years of thinking through. And certainly kind of how did I feel about Chief Spence when she, you never really know what to expect. I saw on Rosie's Facebook page that Teresa was going to Ottawa to go on a hunger strike, so there wasn't any media coverage, and I was in Toronto, so my mom's in Ottawa, so I just drove and showed up there at 6 a.m., and you watch something explode, and, I think Teresa too, she's seen me as sort of this film student that's come up for summers, and she's like, there's your camera, good to see you again, and not really knowing, she's had a lot of media attention from up in National, so I think that allowed for a certain level of her relaxing in front of me, but at the same time, she had lots on her mind. So it's been a really challenging film to tell, especially in the middle of the housing crisis. I never really thought the conclusion would be that the community, people should just move to the city. So that was just really shocking for me. There's things that, if only Canadians knew. Well, in fact, actually, it swung in such an opposite direction that I didn't expect. So it was almost it was depressing. There was periods where I kind of wasn't able to work on the film. I was in school, and then I was working. So I had little breaks from the project, because at times it was just really frustrating to work on. But I finished it. So it's one of the largest untouched wetlands, so it's bigger than the Amazon basin and the Siberian lowlands, because they've had development. So the biggest pristine one, and it so long range, so toxins evaporate in the air from the south, and then they travel north, and then they deposit in peatlands. So carbon sinks. So it stores a lot of carbon. I've read scientists have reported that it contributes to a tenth of cooling the planet, but it also stores mercury that's been evaporated from burning coal to volcanoes. So the mercury comes up and it deposits in the wetland. And so what De Beers is doing, this is very much an experimental mining technique. So they're doing an open pit mine in a wetland. So the best way to describe that is like mining a sponge in a bathtub. So they're constantly pumping water out, and that drains the peat that has been storing mercury. So when you drain the peat, it mobilizes and then it washes into the river. So, or it accumulates up the food chain. So it's De Beers, in fact, when they did their environmental assessment, they thought they were only going to need to pump X amount of water every day, and they got their approval that way. And then they realized that they needed to pump, I think it was twice for sure, it might have been 3 times more than that per day. So they were changing how much they were pumping out of the water after they'd gotten their approval. So they didn't quite realize how much they were going to have to do. And I thought where your question was going before was actually just the fragile social landscape that was up there. And even in sort of De Beers reports, they just had come from Africa, basically, and they thought that Canada had education systems. I don't want to paraphrase too much from De Beers, but they were definitely not prepared for how much training needed to happen to get people to be able to participate in jobs. So a lot of their planning wasn't quite appropriate for landscape.
One last question.
I just wondered when the folks in Ottawa get to see your film.
So the main people that have been featured in the film have seen it, and finding ways to get up there is really challenging. Right now is their goose hunt season, so I was actually talking to people before they went off, so people aren't back in the community for another couple weeks. And I'd really like to go up with my dad and the NGOs that are going up there just to talk about what's happening, because those reports that are coming out are very difficult to understand and access. So I'm talking with community members about when a good time is, because there's often so much happening in a community. That's why you have to go and spend time there. So we're trying to, later in June would seem like a better time to go up there. So that's where we're looking at, trying to find ways to get funding. It's not cheap getting up there, and this is my student film, but it's important that the community sees it, so we're making plans for that.
Thank you for coming. Oh my God. Yeah. You did really well. Thank you, Elaine. Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you
you.
for coming.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing to see someone follow through
Yeah.